So dramatic.
All righty, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to episode 13 of Convention Conversations, Change the Name. Welcome, everybody. My name is Michael Passaro. My pronouns are he, him. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from Midtown Manhattan, which is the traditional ancestral territory of the Lenape people. And I want to add a little bit to this, and I want to also acknowledge the acknowledgement to some degree. I want to thank the nursing school at Columbia University for this additional information, which I think is really profound and beautiful. Lenape means real person. It means original person. Lenape also means collectively a living and breathing community. And I really love this land acknowledgement and adding that bit of detail because it simultaneously honors the legacy of an individual as part of a community. And I think that's what we strive to do every day as stage managers and as theater practitioners. We honor the individual as part of the community. Before we get into the conversation, I'm going to try to channel my best Brene Brown in hosting this today. I would love for the folks in this room to introduce themselves as well. Why don't we start with Amanda?
Hi, friends. My name is Amanda Spooner. A lot of people call me Spooner. All of you can call me Spooner. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am joining this call from the native lands of Cayuga Nation, the Haudenosaunee and the Susquehannock, also referred to as Ithaca, New York. I am a counselor in the Eastern region, a stage management counselor, and therefore also a delegate for the upcoming convention for Actors Equity Association. And I'm going to pass it to Heather Brose.
Hi, friends. My name is Heather M. Burrows, and I am coming to you from the Kumeyaay region from San Diego. I'm the San Diego liaison delegate, and I am also a proud Actors Equity stage manager. And I'm going to pass it to Pat.
Hi, I'm Pat Loeb. I am on the unceded lands of the Chumash and the Tongva, otherwise known as Los Angeles. And I am a proud stage manager of Equity. And I'm going to pass it to Katie Young.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Young. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming to you from the original land of the Lenape people in Harlem, New York. And I am an Eastern stage management delegate of Actors Equity. Ruth?
Hi, I am Ruth Eitmiller. I use she, her pronouns. I am calling in from the land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and I am a Western stage management delegate. And I'll pass it to Jonathan.
Is that me? For a
That's
minute.
you.
My connection is a little wonky. I'm Jonathan Brody. I'm an Eastern Chorus delegate in Narrowsburg, New York, which are the lands of the Munsee Lenape, and he, him. And I guess I will pass it to Jennifer. I think it was our last to speak.
Yes. Hi, I'm Jennifer Shire, she, hers, her, and I'm coming from the Ochet, Shakoween, Kickapoo, Peoria, Miami, and Kaskaskia, also known as Champaign, Illinois. I am an equity stage manager, and I am also just about to get my doctorate degree looking at the history of stage management.
Thank you all so much. I should add that I am an equity stage manager of many years as well. Ruth, I believe we want to also read into the conversation the code of conduct.
That's correct. Do you want to read it, or would you like me to?
I would appreciate it if you could. Thank you.
Happy to. The Transparency Coalition is a group of Actors Equity Association delegates dedicated to leadership and communication that is truly representative of our union's members. We're bringing the discussion of convention resolutions and amendments directly to members through a series of live discussions, allowing members to ask questions and express their support or concerns in real time. We are committed to creating an environment that is rooted in respect so that we can productively create and sustain this inclusive, respectful, brave, safe space to discuss complicated issues. We will always extend that respect to members watching, and we seek the same in return. What we ask is that both the members engaging in conversation with us and the delegates themselves hold these two agreements. 1, speak from the I. 2, confront confusion or discomfort with curious questions. While we are happy to engage in constructive debate, we view harassment and discrimination as a clear threat to free expression and participant safety, and as such, they will not be tolerated. We ask that the members who engage with us give us the grace to say, I don't know, or to get it wrong sometimes. We bring you this series of convention conversations not only to have meaningful dialogue with current and future members, but to learn more ourselves about the important policies of our union and to enhance our ability to serve as trusted liaisons for our fellow union members.
Thanks, Ruth. And I just wanted to add to that in my role as moderator, if there's anything that I might say that harbors an unconscious bias or is harmful to anyone in any way, I hope you will feel safe and brave enough to hold me accountable, call me into the conversation, and give me the opportunity to acknowledge the impact and commit to doing better. On that note, I think we should get started, and I am so thrilled to have everybody in this conversation tonight, and so honored to be a part of it. I do want to put my college professor hat on for just like 1 second and say that I'm a huge fan of history, and I teach at Columbia University, and I try to weave history into many of our stage managing classes there. And here tonight we have soon to be Dr. Jennifer Shire, who I believe is the first and only person to get a doctorate in the history of stage management. Is that true, Jennifer?
Well, I really hate using the word first to do anything because I feel like it's really hard for anybody to really like say it's the first person to do anything. But I will say this, I have been searching theses and dissertations all over the place as far as history of American stage management goes, and I haven't found anything. So there is that. Although I would say that there are a couple of other people who have gotten, PhDs who are stage managers.
But in terms of our conversation tonight, which I think is so relevant and present and resonant, where we are now, the moment that we find ourselves in now, the moment that we want to address and bring to life, change the name, I think it would be so helpful to know sort of how we got here to some degree. How did stage managers become part of Actors Equity, and why aren't we part of the name? If we've been part of the union for so long and so integral to how the union runs and how we advocate for actors, how come we're not in the name? Any thoughts?
So many thoughts. In fact, I literally just wrote a dissertation. It's about 250 pages long. That's all about this topic. So really, the thing is the labor associated with stage management, right? When we think about stage managers, we're talking about people holding onto the prompt book, writing, all of the blocking down into the book. We're talking about calling the show. We're talking about really doing all of those organizational things. And that labor has been around since the 1400s. So almost the entire time that we have had actors, we have had somebody doing the role of the stage manager. Now, at that point in time, they were going by a different name. They were going by the term prompter. And around Shakespeare's time, we have the stage manager come up, and they're really doing more of what we associate with the director's role. Right, they were kind of choosing the cast, they were picking what shows they wanted to do, and they were the person giving that blocking, but the person writing that blocking down, organizing everything backstage was the prompter. And so the labor of the stage manager and actors they're intricately tied all the way throughout history. And we actually don't really see these titles, director, designers, all of the other ones that we associate with modern day theater didn't really come into being until like the late 1800s. At which point we have this director who now takes over what used to be the stage manager's role, and that stage manager kind of slowly started taking over the prompter's labor, and eventually became what we associate with contemporary stage management today, being that recording the show inside the prompt book, calling the show, organizing everything. And because of that, stage managers were included from the very beginning in the Actors Union because they were also leading stars at that time. So they were acting on top of stage managing from the very beginning in 1913 when Actors Equity first got started. So at that point in time, it was a no-brainer that stage managers were being included in this union because of the fact that acting was such a huge part of the stage manager's labor at that time. But gradually, over the next 20 years after that, the stage manager's role really started to shift and change and move away from those acting origins into more of a technical oversight of the entire production. But at that point in time, Actors Equity had already gotten started, and they actually got started as a professional organization, not as a labor union. And we don't actually see that really happen until the summer of 1919, right before we had that famous strike. We turned to the AFL, and for one reason or another, it's complicated. They weren't able to get into the AFL right away, and then finally they ended up chartering under what we now know as the 4As. Right, that was like one of the deals was that they wanted to make sure that they could include other performing unions under the umbrella of the 4As. So they chartered with Equity under the 4As, and that allowed Equity to get started as a labor movement instead of being a professional organization. And that was a really drastic shift for Equity because I feel like that was really the start of their professionalization as a field. And so several months after that, we actually see a producer who fired the assistant stage manager on a show without giving them their 2 weeks pay, which was a thing inside their contract. So that was owed to this ASM.
And I'm speaking of sort of like the rule books today, where they have all the sections about, the actor rules and all the sections about stage manager rules. Did those exist in that form, from the beginning of Actors Equity?
So when they first got started, those first contracts and those first rule books were all just kind of included in on the contract. It was like a single page. And then they also started, as it became more complicated, having that rules governing employment booklet where they would have those rules, but they weren't necessarily divided in actors, versus stage managers. In fact, the stage management rule didn't come into being until 1952 was the first time that the stage management rule kind of existed. And the only reason why it ended up getting existed was because the stage managers in 1938, 1942, 1947, and 1948, the stage management community started building a grassroots campaign to kind of say, hey, Equity, look at our role. Our role has changed and you need to acknowledge it. And we need you to acknowledge this because right now you're harming our field by forcing us to continue with this idea that we are just actors that have these additional responsibilities as stage managers. So it took a lot of time and it took a lot of energy on the stage manager. And we slowly grew that movement until finally the stage management community turned to each other and they were like, listen, equity's not doing what we need them to do, so let's form the Stage Managers Association. And that happened in 1948. Really, it was the end of 1947. And within days, equity leadership started investigating the Stage Managers Association because they were nervous. There was a lot of things going on at that point in time because, we've got communism, we've got the Taft-Hartley had just gotten passed. We've got all of these nuances that I'm really kind of stripping away from this story, but just know that there were reasons for equity to do the things that they were doing, but it still didn't bode well for the stage management community.
Right.
And so, they ended up agreeing to negotiate for a minimum salary specific to stage managers. They ended up agreeing to have a 12-person committee that was devoted to stage management concerns, so that they could weigh in. They didn't have any authority. They didn't have any say as to what was going to end up being ruled as far as the executive council goes, but it was a committee that would be able to give their opinion to those people who would make that decision. And a couple of other things, but it all happened with a cost, and that cost was the Stage Management Association. So they made the Stage Management Association dissolve before, they were willing to negotiate for these things that the stage management community had been arguing for since 1938, so 12 years.
Wow. And so in terms of the conversation that we find ourselves in now, today, and kind of like time traveling, over and through the years, has there ever been a time at which, and I'm opening this up to the group, but I honestly am asking for my own learning intentions as well. Has there ever been a time that stage managers spoke up to say, hey, wait a second, we should be part of the name of the union? Or is this just something of the moment now?
I mean, historically speaking, I will have to admit that my research really kind of ends around 1950, 1952. So I can say up until that point, stage management hadn't even broached the topic of changing the name. They were more focused at that point on equity, acknowledging the fact that stage management was a separate field, a separate career from acting. So whether or not that happened between 1952 to today, I don't feel comfortable saying with any authority.
Sure. But in terms of the current conversation and some of the, if I'm using the incorrect word, please correct me. The resolutions or the things that are going to the delegate council, the convention. When did those start to come about? When did those conversations start to happen? Why is it this moment that has brought them forward to the point that we're facing now?
I mean, I'll jump in.
Please.
I've been a member for 17 years of a union that doesn't represent me in the name. It doesn't. When people say, what union are you in? And I say Actors Equity, and they're like, oh, what roles have you done? And I'm like, stage manager extraordinaire. Like it feels like we're othered within our union simply based on the name. And I mean, for me, it's always been an issue, but I think that amongst stage managers, we've collectively come together, and not all of us, because we're not a monolith. We're not all in agreement about it. But I think that Amanda Spooner started Year of the Stage Manager last year in anticipation of what 2020 was supposed to be for us. And then the great pause happened. But there's been lots of talks about the name within that group.
I mean, I have to say for myself, speaking personally, that I've been a member of Equity for 30 plus years now, 34, 35 years now. And I read some of the documentation that I think the delegation is going to be considering next week. And it was actually quite moving to me, quite personal, and quite, I recognize myself in so many of the items that are being, talked about in terms of this conversation. And, as far as speaking for myself, I'm all in all in, to support this as a member. I'm not a member of council. I'm not a delegate. I'm, just a journey person, stage manager, like all of us here. But I'm all in terms of really having recognition that we are so much so integral to how theater shows work everywhere, whether it's Broadway, wherever we're working on an equity contract. It's so important to recognize our contribution to the process as collaborators.
I also think that I don't know that this is a direct impetus for the campaign to change the name, but we had this very clear representation of something that I think stage managers oftentimes feel on the job, but in this little microcosm with the SAG-AFTRA equity disagreement over streaming of theater over the summer. And ultimately, the result of that conflict was that stage managers weren't being offered union contracts to do their work, even when our Actors Equity Association siblings were being offered acting contracts to do that work. And a lot of people on the internet were confused that we were even in the union. People who are in the union with us were confused that we were in the union. And I know that's something I've experienced with either actors I've been working with or sometimes employers. There's, by virtue of it being so specifically Actors Equity Association, it implies that it does not include stage managers. And for me, one of the things I'm really interested in is if we do have a name that more effectively represents the nature of our membership, how can we use that to really leverage our power as workers? Actors and stage managers are in the process together. So if we're in this process together,
it's a great question.
Yeah, I think that to me is part of the power of changing the name, is making a statement to our employers that we are workers who have shared interests in safe workplaces, fair working conditions, living wages, access to healthcare. And by having a name that divides us, we're only making it easier for employers to take advantage of us.
It's a great point. You speak very eloquently about it. I have a question and a comment about it, but someone else wanted to offer something into the conversation.
Oh, it was me, Amanda. I have a really bad connection, so forgive me if I'm sound like a robot. I think that changing the name is not just the result, right? The ultimate result of having a name that's more inclusive of more jobs and better represents the jobs and the work that's being done in the membership. It's also a gesture, which I think is scaffolding off what Katie's saying. It's a gesture saying, we're here, we're standing in solidarity. We are not a midpoint between the relationship of a performer, an actor, and a producer. We actually are members of the company. We're not supervisors. We manage projects is what we do. The agreements that are made that are collectively bargained and otherwise are between the producer, the employer, and the union. And we're a part of that union. And so I think the gesture is an important part of it. And for me, just to answer your question, Michael, about, when did this start bubbling up? I became a member in the fall of 2008. And I struggled with it then. And there's a picture, I wish I had it, and I wish I knew how to share on StreamYard. I don't. But there's a picture on my social media way back when, I think it was also on my MySpace, where I'm standing in front of the placard on the Equity Building in New York City going like this, because the picture that I was taking was like, I'm not an actor. I've never been an actor. I'm referred to, I was a blueberry muffin when I was 5. That's where I drew the line. But it's like, that's not what I do. And so even then I had such a feeling of not being included. And one of the things that I call her Dr. Jennifer, one of the things that Dr. Jennifer really introduced me to and her work and her research, and I'm so grateful for it, is the idea that stage managers as prompters used to be visible. You used to hear bells ring to cue different cues. They used to be visible, and we accepted that, right? But as time went on and technology progressed, we weren't so visible anymore. And inherently in the work we do, we wear all black, we disappear backstage. We're not, and that's fine. Like I don't need to be on the stage. I like being in the wings, but because we spend so much time trying to stay out of the way and support as opposed to be in the center of it all, I think when it comes to being laborers, that habit has bled over into how we represent ourselves as laborers and in our own livelihood. And so one of the questions I'm always asking myself is like, why are we not getting loud, stage managers? Hence founding year of the stage manager 2020/21. It's ending in June, damn it, right? But it's because we needed to push. Like, say what you need, get loud. It's okay to be loud outside of the space where you're supporting and operating in the background.
Well, I mean, and I have a thought about that as well, Amanda. And this is, specifically my experience, which is mostly New York and mostly Broadway centric. But I feel certainly as a production stage manager, and even on the assistant level as well, that the job has now come, in some ways, if not physically, more present, but allegorically more present, because I don't think it's a job as a PSM or as an ASM where you can necessarily, disappear behind, curtains and in a corner and whispering cues. The job is very front and center on the organizational chart. I think no matter where we get to practice, or I'm privileged to practice stage managing. So I think in my mind, to that degree, that's why I would, 100% wholeheartedly support, bringing our name onto the front pages of every single, rule book and building and everything that goes with it. And I love the idea that you offered, Amanda, as well, that a gesture means so much. It could mean so much. I'm curious, and I, even after being in the union for so many years, how does this work? I mean, what's the next step? Who does it need to go to? What barriers are we receiving to doing what seems to be so simple in terms of the union itself?
Are you talking specific? Well, let me actually respond to something that you said that I think is right on. As someone who also is professionally based in New York and is a little bit on Broadway, mostly off Broadway, like my style of stage management is, to your point, Michael, do you hear an echo? I hear an echo. Maybe it's just me. You do. Somebody else might be unmuted. There you go. I just so stage managed this moment. But to your point, like in New York, like absolutely, like I feel like I'm not tiptoeing around. I guess what I'm talking about is that our experience in New York, to your point, is not the same that everyone else is having in every other market or even in every theater in New York, A. But also B, culturally, we do a lot of this to ourselves, just want to say stage managers, but culturally, we are seen more than we're heard. And there's a lot of thoughts about, like, if a show is going to transfer, well, they're not going to pay for the stage managers to go. If the show's going to, have an out-of-town tryout, well, they're not going to pay for the stage managers to go. I've literally had, I think we do a lot of that damage to ourselves. I do, but I've literally had general managers be like, well, you're the stage manager. When we're talking about the cast getting together to negotiate for a share of the money after it recoups, I've literally had general managers who I'm friends with you know, but they're like, oh, but you're a stage manager, so you're not included in that. And so I think there's sort of a bigger conversation. Like there's a lot of tentacles sort of like, you know, unfurling from this conversation. And I'm happy to hang out for all of it. But I think that your point is well taken, Michael. And I think that it's not the same experience, you know, that you said for everyone. But I also think like culturally, I have to ask myself, and I'll start with me, like ask myself, like, why don't you speak up when there's something that you need? And like, why don't you tell people, actually, I'm on a break right now, but when we get back, we'll restore the room. You know, I think it's easier for some folks than others to say that. And I think part of like you're the stage manager, for example, was to put up an orange flag and say, hey, everyone, we're not a monolith, to use Heather's word, right? Like we're not a monolith. Come to us with your truths, because I bet when we shake them out, there's a common trend here. Not everyone thinks we should change the name. To get to your question of like what's next, there are some people that think if it has any financial implications, it's not worth exploring, which I hear. I don't agree with personally, and that's okay. You know, again, orange flag. So there's a lot of people who feel that way. There's some people who sincerely have messaged me. They're worried about their swag. And Katie Young and I like to joke about that a little bit, but like it's true. Like they're worried, like what happens to all the Post-its and pens and lanyards, you know? But we've seen, and I don't know if you've all seen it, but I highly recommend you check it out. The convention itself has a logo that they cooked up for the convention, and it's a happy mask with a headset on it. I think Katie's going to go get it, show it off. And so to me, like the thing we have to remember too is that equity in England, you know, in Great Britain, they're called equity. Now it's different union, right? But they're called equity. SDC recently changed their name, and the resolution that we've put together, a group of us put together and will be presented at the convention, suggests, to answer your question, that this go to council, that the delegates say this needs to go to council. We're saying this needs to change, and council has 3 years to make the change. 3 years. Do you know how many babies I could have in 3 years? That's a lot of people. Just saying.
No, that's very helpful for me to know. And also, I just want to acknowledge, Amanda, you know, what from my own perspective, I recognize, I acknowledge the extreme privilege that I have in my position here as a Broadway stage manager, and all the intersections that you know comes into contact with, and I don't take it lightly. And I know that I am someone who can speak up for me and for, you know, others as well when I want to, and I do, and I know that not everyone has that privilege, but I don't take it lightly, and I have been known to do it on a number of occasions, because, you know, some of the things that have been asked of me personally, you know, over the and more so, you know, as the shows become more complicated, there is more on our plate. There's more on our plate now as we're, you know, re-entering, you know, the workspace, you know, after the pandemic, that I don't think that we can even start to begin to comprehend. That's going to be, oh, that'll be something that the stage manager does. And I'm not talking about, you know, the COVID compliance stuff, because thankfully I think the union has done a very good job in making sure that we are not going to be responsible for that. But you know how it is. Oh, the stage manager, they'll take care of it. They'll take care of it. That list is growing and growing and growing. Anyway, you know, I don't take it lightly that I can speak up when I want to, and I have. So just in terms of the convention coming up, will this definitely go to council, or is there another series of steps that have to happen before that?
So if the convention votes it up, if the delegates vote it up, we need 50% plus 1. Then it will get sent to council for council to decide how to move forward. It's not binding. So convention could vote it up with 90% support, and council could say, we this would cost money, so we're not going to do it. Council could say, we know the delegates liked it, but we totally disagree. We don't think it's worth doing. Hopefully what council does, I'm optimistic. They say this is important and they'll put it on an agenda to discuss. And ultimately it requires a change to our constitution because Actors Equity Association, being the name of the organization, is included in our constitution. And there are two ways currently to change the organization's constitution. One is by a 2/3 majority vote by convention itself. We did not opt to go that path with this resolution. We felt that it was important for council having the opportunity to discuss it, to be part of that path forward. The other option to change the constitution is for council to put forth a referendum vote to membership. So ideally what happens is council reviews this and puts it forth to the membership to vote on whether or not we change the name of the union. What exactly that looks like, there's a fair amount of latitude for council to decide if they're offering membership names to choose from, if they're just saying, yes, we're changing the name, or no, we're not changing the name. All of that is still very much up in the air. But I think our kind of dream version is that within the next 3 years, council would offer the referendum vote to membership to officially change the name of the union legally.
Well, I thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I think it's, I just want to point out that, again, I'm learning so much here in this conversation tonight. And I know that there's been so many calls for transparency and for the union to, do better in terms of communication and letting the membership know what's going on. And I'm not trying to come down on either side of this equation, but just what you described and just getting this particular motion to move forward, is a very, unions, Actors Equity moves in a very analog way. And I know that we all live in a digital world, and we can get information, on our fingertips within split seconds. But that's not the way the union works. So I just think it's worthwhile to point out that something like this is taking this much effort, this much passion, this much emotion, to get it moved forward, and just in light of what people are asking for in terms of transparency. So just pointing that out.
Yeah, so. I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar national organization, so I have some amount of sympathy for things not happening overnight.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard because we don't always get the kind of signposts along the way as part of what's happening. We just get the announcement 4 years later that we've done this. And I think sometimes we want those check-ins so that we know that things are happening. 100%.
And I believe me, this entire year I've been saying, can we just try to get ahead of the news cycle a little bit? Can we just try to understand that if, for example, again, Broadway centric, if the Broadway League is having conversations about reduced work weeks, meaning a reduced number of performances on Broadway, which means reduced salary, can we hear about it from our union first, as opposed to reading about it in the New York Post and Charlotte St. Martin? Is it that hard to ask for? We don't, just to say, we know you're going to read about this. We know you're going to read about this. We don't have any answers yet. We're working on it. We want you to hear it from us first, as opposed to, the Broadway briefing or whatever. Anyway, I digress. Amanda, one thing you mentioned that I want to just get clarification on. Some people, and I'm paraphrasing, so please correct me if I've misstated. Some people don't want to move this forward if it costs any money. Can you clarify that a little bit? If it costs the union money to change stationery, building signage, websites, things like that?
Yeah, in my travels, because I've been talking about this for a while, I hear a lot about even pre-COVID, it's not a priority. We need the money for organizing contracts. We need the money for educating members. a lot of decisions being made, armchair decisions, without a lot of transparency about how money is spent at equity, right? There's questions being asked now that we're in the pandemic. There's questions being asked about now that we don't have a default physical equity card. Where's that money going
Right.
to? Like, how are we going to spend that? I think we even hear from equity leadership at times that if you want more work, you can't have more communication, which any stage managers who are listening know that I'm referring to something that happened in an unofficial AA stage manager Facebook group. We don't live in an either or world. There are many things that are priorities. I want racial justice for our members. I want inclusivity for our members. That would be my top priority for sure. Putting us back to work because we're a labor union would be a top priority for sure. But we can also have a priority for stage managers to be better represented, for stage managers to be considered when concessions are being made, especially now as we're in a pandemic and we're going back to work, for stage managers to be considered in the humanity of the decisions that we make. I've seen those decisions being made. I serve on a lot of committees. I'm on council. It's my third year. I'm finishing my third year in council. It's not to write a narrative that there are villains in governance at all. There's just committee meetings that I've been to where they start talking about organizing more contracts. And the idea of organizing contracts with teaching artists is very quickly referred to as, actors who are teaching artists. And I constantly, my little Zoom hand is so tired. The blood's running out of all my little Zoom fingers being like, oh, you mean stage managers too, right? And I don't mean to write social parking tickets, but like, come on. Right. And when I asked recently in a committee meeting, like, oh, are you referring to stage managers too? The person who was running the meeting said, oh, yeah, well, ever since stage managers became a part of the union, and then my little hand went up again, like it's an educational thing. And it's not to villainize people. I'm not mad at individuals. It's not character assassination. It's cultural. We've done it to ourselves, right? We're the worst offenders. So when people say, oh, if it costs anything, it's not worth it. We have to go back to work. We have to do this. We have to do that. Like when we start nickel and diming everything, I'm like, okay, great. I'm happy to have that conversation. I would have been fine as a delegate without a care package. I didn't need hand sanitizer that was branded for the convention. Thank you. But I hoarded like a mofo and I got enough hand sanitizer. Thank you very much. I didn't need it. I didn't need a notebook. I didn't need pens. I didn't need the postage spent, right? So getting into the nickel diamond conversation, it's just as easy to go, well, if we're going to have this and not that, then let's not have that. But I want to back up a little bit and say it's about prioritizing the members of the union, the paying members of the union. I pay dues. I work a lot less now, but I work. I participate. I volunteer my time to be a counselor. I show up to committee meetings. I'm educating people about our union all the time. Members, non-members, you name it, right? Future members. So I'm super committed to our union, and I feel like the union in its title is not super committed to me. And I want to feel that. And it's okay for that to be a priority as well as the other things that I mentioned. So when people say, can't spend money, it's because we do. We devolve into this nickel and diming conversation. And what I'm saying is the gesture of saying it's a priority to make you feel like you are a part of this larger thing that we've all committed to is what's right and is what's fair.
And it doesn't cost anything to do that. Look at how we have been inclusive tonight. Our pronouns, our land acknowledgement. That didn't cost us anything, and it was the right and proper and good thing to do. And the union can do the same thing in terms of the issue that we're talking about tonight. It doesn't cost them to say in a council meeting, teaching artists, actors, and stage managers. You can think of a million different examples of that.
But I don't think it's so much our union. I think it's our fellow members that we have to educate the most on this, because I've had conversations with fellow union members, and when they push back on changing the name, and a lot of it's because they have pride in that name, and I understand that. But I said, imagine if the name of our union was Stage Managers Equity Association. And they're like, well, no. And I said, exactly.
Right.
That's the point.
Yep.
And they're like, well, it would have never been because you weren't always there. And then we have to go back to the education part of it again. And so we have a lot of education to do with our members in general, just not this, but in all categories.
Yeah.
But it's a hard pull to get our members with us on this, which is why I'm a bull in a china shop. I just am. Like, I want to go. I wanted this done in a year. And then some smart people who are in this room talked me off of that and said, no, we should do it in 3 years. And it should be council, because I was like, we should come up with like 5 names and then yeah. So I think the way it's being proposed to convention is smart, because stage managers are smart. I mean, we just are. Come on, we can say that. But it is going to be hard, and I think it's going to be a big fight. And if it doesn't pass in this convention, it will be brought up at every convention until it is passed. So we're not going anywhere. We're just not.
I wonder also if I'm sorry, Jonathan.
I was just going to ask if I could weigh in with a few thoughts as the only non-stage manager here, but someone after 35 years in the business. I certainly know the value of our stage managers, and I've always appreciated their work and their contribution as members of the union and members of companies. I totally agree that a name change is a wonderful gesture, and I do support the idea of it. I don't think anyone will come up, unfortunately, with a name that is something of actors and stage managers in the actual name. So anything I've heard is something that is not more inclusional, but less exclusional, which is great. And a lot of people have suggested American equity because we have British equity and Canadian equity. And while that doesn't help educate anybody outside the business that stage managers are part of the union, it also at least keeps from excluding them from the name, and it is more equitable. I do, of course, have concerns about what it will all cost. I do like the 3-year time frame because, one, that gives the union some time to catch up from the losses of the past year and for the business to get going again. I fear that knowing the way things work in the union, there really won't be enough to get it finished, but it's certainly enough time to get the ball rolling and get things started. I think, there will have to be a lot of working groups and committees and looking at the finances and absolutely every minutia that will need to change with a new name. But even before that, there are so many things, like Michael was saying, that don't cost money. And it's just the acknowledgement and conversations and the outreach from membership education and other places and any communications that deal with issues to just always include the stage managers as, it's just, part of any conversation. And that doesn't cost anything. It's just a matter of shifting people's thought process. And, that can start tomorrow and should. Because those ideas aren't necessarily in this resolution, but the resolution is a great way to get the ball rolling. And again, the 3-year time frame is great. It may take longer, maybe it'll take less. I love being an optimist, but the conversation will be had, and council can fiddle with it and say, well, we want to do this now and do that later. And the idea of just changing the conversation and creating more education opportunities within the union and outside of the union, to the general public, to others in the industry, all that can start happening at very little cost. So, I'm behind you. I just am very realistic that it's going to be a long slog and perhaps a difficult fight.
I just think there are so many things, to that point, Jonathan, that are sort of hiding in plain sight that could help move the needle forward. to some degree. And, Amanda, you're so brilliant at the social media, and you're the stage manager, the Facebook, all of that. And many of you may be just as proficient, or let me put it this way, more proficient than I am in terms of that. But is there something there that can be, pushed forward even more than it already is in terms of educating members? And Heather, I have a question about what you offered. When you is it stage managers that we need to educate, or is it stage managers and actors? I
think all members. There's at least one show a year that I do in my talk with the group at the beginning, where we pick the deputy, and I said, I need you to remember I'm in your union. And there's at least one person that says, I'm sorry, what? Because there's not the knowledge that stage managers are in the same union. And I think most stage managers know that. Maybe the baby ones, the younger ones, God bless them, maybe aren't aware of it. But it's mainly our fellow actors who just don't know. And why would they know?
Yeah, no, I've very recently, well, certainly not within the past year, but very recently I had to go to a principal deputy and said, you're my deputy too, you're my deputy too. And here's the issue that I have.
Yeah, advocate for us. All we do in our job is advocate non-stop for you.
I have this dream. That an actor will see that we're rehearsing like the full maximum hours in the week, and will come up to me and say, hey, I noticed we're rehearsing the maximum number of hours. I just wanted to see if you're getting paid, because I noticed that you come in 30 minutes early and you stay after I leave. And are you getting paid overtime for that? And if not, do we need to go talk to the deputy about bringing that up? How dreamy would that be? Because how many times have we all said, hey, producer, if you want to do that fitting with that actor, you need to pay them overtime. Hey, producer, if you need this, you're going to have to pay for it. We are constantly doing that labor for actors. And there's nothing that stops actors doing it for us as well.
Yeah.
But we also have to ask for it, because we put our cape on. Y'all have heard me say this before. We put the cape on and we just do it. We just do the work, and we don't tell anybody that we're doing it. So I think we have to take the cape off and be like, hey, that last move in that transition, the director wanted you to do that, but didn't want to pay you. So you're welcome. You're going to get paid for that now. I think we have to be verbal about that kind of stuff.
No, on the last couple of shows that I worked on here in New York, we get the production stage manager gets two weeks of pre-production. We all know that that's not nearly enough, to put it, bluntly and mildly. I added up all the hours that I spent prior to the 2 weeks of pre-production, and I submitted it to the union. And in one case, it was almost 8 full weeks of work. And I kept very detailed records, at 2 hours here, the meeting here, the time you spend, just trying to figure out how the show's going to move from scene to scene to scene. That doesn't happen in 2 weeks. I would actually, what would be dreamy for me is if I actually just showed up 2 weeks prior and said, okay, where do we start? Page 1. Nothing would get done. Nothing would happen. Anyway,
I think one of the
I digress.
I think one of the most important things this conversation has generated is a recognition of what stage managers actually do. And that ties to, Spooner's Year of the Stage Manager that really burgeoned this effort. I mean, the discussion that has happened a lot in rooms I've been in is, why don't we have the same kind of authority as the ACCA when it comes to stage management issues? Why are our issues backburnered? In deference to the actors. And I know that when the Constitution changed to include the convention last 2 years ago, or whenever that was, when the opening sentence swapped actors and stage managers and became stage managers and actors, there was a hue and cry of how dare they among the acting community, among our counselors, among our members. So I think that this is such an important conversation on so many levels, because as Heather mentioned, how many of us have been in rooms when actors don't realize when the deputy election happens, when the, first rehearsal happens, when everything else happens, that we're members too. How many times are we expected to be, the equity police, to be the only people that know the contract, to be, perfectly willing to stay for 4 hours after a rehearsal for a production meeting that we don't get paid for. There's so many facets of our profession that so many people aren't even aware of. And this year has forced the awareness that has created the opportunity to bring this forth formally in a way that even the people who have been advocating for, wait a minute, what about stage managers, have not been able to accomplish on an individual basis. The year of the stage manager has created the foundation that allowed this to happen, which allowed the awareness to happen, which allowed the change, excuse me, to be brought forward seriously. I know there's financials involved, but look how fast SAG-AFTRA changed their logo. I mean, it was like 2 days later that all the logos were new. So I think it's such an important aspect of that recognition that says, hold the phone, folks. You have to include us in the conversation. You have to include our needs in the conversation. And it's so encouraging to know that in negotiations now, only in the last couple of years, stage management issues have taken a priority after so many years of, we need to concentrate on these other things. And finally, stage management concerns are in the negotiation room. And that is such a huge shift in the perception of the union. This is simply the next step.
Well said. Well said. Ruth.
I think another part of this education inclusion that doesn't cost us anything is there's a part of another resolution, which I don't think we'll get to, that asks that in rule books, in official language, that the use of what we jokingly call capital A actor language changes. Yeah. That in a rule book, if it says capital A actor and it means all members, it should say actors and stage managers, or it should say members. That's something that can just be changed in negotiations, that can then be clear for members and for producers, so that when I go to a producer and say, hey, this rule actually applies to me as well as a stage manager, that is a whole level of recognition that's not going to cost.
Yeah, exactly. It's called find and replace in Word.
Yeah.
Done. Seriously, no, that's exactly what I would say. That these things are sort of hiding in plain sight.
Especially now that we don't get hard copies of the contracts and they're all online and digitally.
To say nothing of that. The other thing too that I've been thinking a lot about, and Amanda brought it up a little bit. There's this gray, mushy area of us being supervisors and disciplining members of our own union. I'm thinking, and this just came to me in this conversation tonight, this whole idea of really, having, being acknowledged in name, I think will help make people understand that we are part of the same union as the actors, and that we are not the employer of record. We are not the employer of record. And I think that there is so much gray, mushy confusion area around that, where people think that we are the employer of record, that we do sign the paychecks, that we are signatories to the limited liability companies. And not true. And that there's a whole host of other things, issues that brings up. But I think this would be a way to help start resolving those too.
I'm going to jump in here really quick just to say, it's so funny that you bring that up, because to me, in my research, I feel like one of the reasons why equity has always been so clear about including stage managers in the union is for that reason, is to say stage managers, you are not connected with the producers. We need you with us. Even from the very beginning, they were very clear. All stage managers have to be equity members. And they wanted to make that division extremely clear between the producers and the stage managers in order to really include them, which is why I argue in my dissertation that they were so insistent. Stage managers are actors with these other, responsibilities, but really they're actors because they wanted us to be in this union so badly for so long. And then finally got to the point where our labor had just changed so much that they had to acknowledge that stage management had changed, and that's when we start to see them acknowledging the fact that stage management is separate from acting. But I also want to note the fact that part of the growth and progress that stage management as a field experienced is so related to our participation in this union, right? When we compare stage management in the United States versus stage management in, Great Britain, in just about anywhere else, it is developed differently. And a large reason why it has changed, we are not supervisors anymore. We are not disciplinarians anymore. We don't have half the technical responsibilities that other stage managers around the world have because of the fact that our union had insisted that we stay with them. And because of the Taft-Hartley, act that passed, that kind of stipulated the fact that we couldn't be supervisors, that we couldn't be disciplinarians. And then, just our participation in this union has influenced our field so much. And to then now, 80, 90 years later, to turn around and be like, well, you know what, we don't really want you anymore, is crazy to me, because we are entrenched in this union, and we have been in this union for so long that it has influenced us, and we have influenced the union, even if our participation has been invisible.
Wow. I want to be mindful of the time clock, going into stage manager mode myself. So, is there anything else we want to add to this? Any final words, thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, Amanda?
Before I go put my 5-year-old to bed, I just wanted to say thank you, everyone. And Michael, please host everything ever.
Oh, God.
It's incredible.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
It's so good. I just could stay here for hours, and I also want to put this child to bed. But I want to say that you're the stage manager as of today has 10 weeks left. That's it. We're going to count down 10 weeks. Now, the Facebook group will stay around. I'm not going to curate it. I'm going off social media for the whole month of July, and you can put that in ink. And if I ever come back, you're welcome, right? But that's the campaign itself, the engine is getting turned off in June. And it's because I grew up in the town that is home to the longest burning light bulb. And ever since I was a kid, I've always been aware of planned obsolescence. And I said, this campaign cannot drag on forever, because we have to all have a little nudge, right? A little nudge, like a mother cat, being go out there and say what you need and share your truths. And then the pandemic happened, and it ended up being the perfect setting for us to create space to make connections, even when we disagree. Even when there's people that are you're the stage manager, doesn't speak for me. Cool, come over and hang out with us and get in space with us and tell us why it doesn't, so that we can learn more. And the stage management community, I've never felt it stronger ever. We're such a strong community. I've just never felt its presence in such a strong way. And I think there's a lot of circumstances that led to that. I don't think it's all year the stage manager that did it. I think the planet started aligning about 5 years ago. But here we are, we're making connections with each other. And I just wanted to say to everyone, we've got 10 weeks to glow real bright with our truths. Glow, 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 glow. The signature color of the campaign is orange, because it's the opposite of dressing in, all black and disappearing, right? So we chose orange for a reason. We're going to glow real bright for 10 weeks. So anybody who's listening to this, I invite you, whether you hate me, okay, I want to learn more about that, maybe. Whether you like disagree with everything we're saying, whatever, like come join us, because we're going to have a lot of space to hang out, connect for the next 10 weeks. There will be stuff that goes on after the campaign is over. We're going to continue meeting to discuss anti-racism and being inclusive in our practice and in ourselves. We'll continue to do that. We read a different book every month. We work with a facilitator, Portia McGovern, shout out, right? Love Portia. We're going to continue doing that. So there's going to be things that are going to continue happening. But for the next 10 weeks, we're going to have a lot of space to connect. We're inviting directors into the conversation. There's directors that are already in our Facebook group that has over, I think we're up to 8,500 people, I think, something like that. There's already directors in there. There's producers in there. There's designers in there. But we're going to start asking them to share space with us so that we can have these conversations and get to know each other's truth and make these critical connections. And if you haven't read Emergent Strategy, you should, because you know what's up with critical connections. So anyway, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to go switch gears and be a caregiver and a parent. But much love to all of you. And I can't wait for the convention this weekend. Thanks, friends.
Thank you, Amanda. You continue to amaze. So thank you so much. Anyway, other thoughts, other comments, questions as we sort of try to not wrap up, but build a bridge to all the things we were talking about tonight.
I'll just echo what Amanda said and say thank you, Michael, so much. This has been a really great conversation. I
had a great time. I need to do more of this. I would love it. Please. I would really. The thing too is I have learned so much in the last, really the last few weeks about how the union works, and I've always said to cast members in my shows, I try to sort of curate the deputies. I'm like, you should be a deputy. You should learn more about how the union works. You're going to be in this for the long haul. Learn from the ground up. It's a great experience, but I feel like I'm taking my own advice. So thank you for having me.
I've been telling a lot of people that they should run for delegate next time. If you don't want to run for council, I get that. But like run for delegate, because I mean, we've had this time. And so like, I've been in it to win it. Like, I don't know what to win what, but like I'm doing all the things I can do because we have this time now. Yeah. And if we were in the before times, we couldn't have been as activated as we are. And so I've learned, I mean, I like to think I know a lot about the union. I didn't know anything. Like in comparison to what I've learned. So like, I say for those, because we have lots of members who are just naturally activated right now, who aren't delegates. I'm like, come join us. Like hold us accountable and then come join us and then learn with us. Like, because we need your voices. I'm not going to agree with you. You're not going to agree with me. But like, that's the beauty of our union. Like we can have differing opinions and they can still both be right, So it's like, come join us.
Yeah, and I really hope that ethic, stays with us, beyond when we get back into the workspaces. It will be it's time well spent, and now I want to sort of tilling the soil. I want to see, the things come up out of that, the growth from that. So
yeah, I'll echo what Heather said. I've learned so much about how our union works, what it means to be in a union. And like the delegate community has introduced me. I participated in a thing called Strike School, which taught how to build like high participation strikes. I've become entrenched in like harassment policy and where that line divides between like union capability to employer responsibility, to what we can do ourselves as activists. And to me, so much of what I've been learning is that we as workers are most powerful when we're unified. And our power comes from our ability to withhold our labor. Like that is why a union is so powerful. And at times I think whether it's not enough member education, not enough positive communication, it can feel like the union is this like building on 46th Street that the union is a couple of people in leadership, that the union is council, but we are the union. And that is one of the biggest reasons why I feel so strongly about this change the name resolution. It feels like an embodiment, a recognition of our power as workers unified together. And I want us to claim that power that we have as stage managers and actors so that we can improve our workplaces. We can help hold our employers accountable for all of the things that we have discovered or rediscovered or have been learning about over the last 9 months of what we want our workplaces to look like. We have the power to make that a reality, but we don't have that power as individuals as much as we do as a group.
And also what we're curious about. What are our dreams? How do we think about it in the future as well? And knowing, again, to kind of, I think I'm sort of doing a little segue into sort of our initial commentary about history. Knowing where we came from, having that knowledge, that's how, knowing those things, I think that's how people become unified as a group, and want to do more and do better.
The power and safety of numbers is so amazing. And as people talk about, well, was there anything good that happened during, as Heather named it, the Great Pause? I think one of the most powerful and one of the best things that happened was the creation of this national and in many cases international community of people finding out that they weren't alone and finding out that we have common cause, and that because we were able to unite over the course of these months in preparing for this stuff, we have the power that comes with a group of people who've worked together to create potential solutions that wouldn't have happened, that didn't happen while we all thought we were flying solo and didn't know other people in our community the way we do now. So we do have something really positive that's come out of this pandemic, which is this community of stage managers who are able to empower ourselves to make at least some of the differences that we need to see for our lives and for our careers. So yes. Yay.
Yes. And you remind me of one of my favorite quotes. I'm big on quotes, and this is something that I tell my stage management students up at Columbia during their first class, for the first year students. And it's this great quote from Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." That's the truth. Those words were spoken many, many, many years ago, and might as well have been today. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for the privilege and the honor of being in community and in conversation with all of you tonight. And I'm looking forward to next best practices in terms of changing the name. So thank you all so much. It was great to be here. Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to put my admin hat on for just a second. We only have a couple of these episodes left. The next one is actually going to be in about 45 minutes at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. And we'll have a stage management episode part 2 this coming Friday.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks all very much. Thanks again for having me. Good night.
Thank you.